Long ago, on Halloween night, a masked killer roamed the desolate streets of a quiet Arizona suburb. In search of victims, his blade trembled in his hand as he hunted. The muffled breathing behind the latex clown mask was all that could be heard from him. His eyes raced from side to side as he watched countless children prance around in their colorful or spooky costumes, shouting with joy and excitement from the endless amounts of sugar they would soon devour. Continuing down the street, he spotted a teenage couple preparing to enter a treehouse in a backyard. Making his way toward them, the couple was already safe inside. It wouldn't be long before they'd make their exit, and this man had nothing but patience, along with the urge to strike. As the couple made love in the treehouse, the silent figure leaned behind the tree in wait. Taking the blade against the bark, he carved something that read, "Hide all you want. I will find you." As he finished his crude writing, a groan could be heard from above, implying that the male had finished. "I'm gonna go grab a beer. You want one?" he asked his lover, before she smiled and nodded in approval. Slipping into his jeans, he blew her a kiss as he exited through the trap door in the floor of the wooden asylum. Silently whistling a tune, the man behind the tree reached out and clamped his hand fiercely around the young teen's throat and slammed his head against the rough bark. The teen struggled to break free before the bark was struck a second time against his skull. Blood sprayed against the killer's mask as he forced the boy to stop breathing and ended his life with a final slam. The limp figure fell free from his grip and collapsed into the grass. Glaring down at the young boy, he felt no remorse for what he did. A thump from above refocused his attention to the girl still inside. He took hold of the crude planks nailed into the tree used as a ladder and made his way inside. "Well, it took you long enough," she began to say as the creaking of the trapdoor echoed inside the small room. "Where's my—" She stopped suddenly as she turned over to see who was standing over her. She began to sob in fear as he exposed the blade. I swear I have no idea where she is," she began. "You have to believe me. Please, don't hurt me." Her cries of desperation had no effect on the killer as he made his way closer to her. She pushed herself away from him until she was in the far corner of the treehouse. Inching closer, the man sheathed the blade and reached down to help her up, as if sympathizing with her. Her tears began to slow as she looked him in the eyes, believing that he would not harm her. She smiled a bit before the man let out a muffled exhale of breath and forcefully grabbed her throat. The rubber of the gloves was all she could feel before he pushed her against the wall and raised her higher. Exposing the blade once more, she struggled like her boyfriend did outside as he lightly pressed the razor-sharp tip against her soft flesh. Without any motion of the blade, her struggles created incisions against her belly. The thick crimson poured onto the floor as she slowly began to go numb. Growing weary, the man decided to end her life. He carried her to the window with his hand still clamped around her throat and tossed her out. As she fell, she resembled an angel slowly falling from heaven about to collide with the earth. The man glanced down as her lifeless body crashed beside her lover, their hands now together a final time. He sat in the window and leaped down with much fury. The man stumbled off into the night in silence as children continued to roam the streets in hopes of collecting more candy. This is not the end of this man's gruesome tale. His rampage will not stop. He will continue on until he finds her and fatally ends her life. The pumpkins sang. The flickering lampposts cast the streets of Terratum in a dull glow, but with the illumination of the bonfire within them, the residents could do without it. Vampires, princesses, and fairies flitted about, baskets swinging from their hands. Superheroes chatted idly with creepy clowns holding balloons, and skeletons warmed their bones by the satisfying heat. All were dancing to the song of the night, smoke curling up towards the full moon like greedy claws to a pearl. Pirates and demons worked in tandem to keep the fire roaring. Bats and black cats mingled on the side, while jack-o'-lanterns smiled on in barely contained excitement. Little werewolves eagerly galloped through the fields, squealing and devouring candies from their bursting sacks. In the hollow of Terratum, all was jubilant. The town celebrated in harmony. On the verge of the festivities, a young witch felt a tug on her cloak. She peered under the wide brim of her hat, turning her attention to a small ghost at her side. "Do you know where my mommy is?" it asked in a small, scared voice. Immediately, the witch took pity on the poor thing. It was covered in white, draped all the way to the ground, with two tear-filled eyes that met hers. "I haven't, sweetheart," she cooed, her long black nails clenching her broomstick for balance as she stooped down to meet its gaze more evenly. "But I'd be happy to come look for you with her. What's your name, little one? Where did you last see your mommy?" "By the Jensen's house," the ghost sniffled, shifting anxiously. "I'm Liam." The witch paused. She didn't recognize any of those names. "Sorry, dear, I don't know them," she said, her voice calm and kind. "But come, let's search together." The specter nodded, and the witch straightened up. She didn't offer it her hand, as the little ghost seemingly had none. But then, suddenly, from underneath the veil of white, a long, skinny, pale arm emerged and stretched toward her. The witch screamed, and everything stopped. The music, now interrupted, screeched to a halt. Heads turned in all directions, trying to find the source of the commotion. The bats squeaked and flapped their wings, and the cat's fur bristled in agitation. The ghost began to cry, and the sheet slipped from his head, fluttering like a useless tissue to the ground below. Almost in unison, Terratum gasped. The werewolf children howled in alarm. Zombies' jaws dropped to the floor. Jack-o'-lantern's chiseled grins shifted into little O's of surprise. All eyes were turned upon the sobbing child and the witch, who had recoiled backward in shock. After a few seconds of utter silence, the witch finally composed herself. She dropped her broomstick to the ground and knelt beside the child, taking him into her arms. "Oh, I'm so sorry, darling. We just don't get many visitors like you here," she murmured, stroking his hair as he whimpered and shook. "Everything's perfectly all right. You're just turned around, that's all." She withdrew from his little body again, using her black cape to dry his blotchy red eyes. "Would you like to join our party until your mother comes to fetch you, Liam?" The child stared at the crowd, hesitating. The residents waited with bated breath. When he gave a little nod, the group cheered and released. The werewolf children, eager to introduce themselves to a new friend, rushed forward to show him their games. The witch smiled as she watched his sad eyes brighten, his sheet forgotten as he was dragged into the fun. The party continued, and the bonfire burst back to life. The pumpkins resumed their song. These days, it had become Halloween tradition to procrastinate until the afternoon of October 31st, then put random pieces of gum, candy, or fruit into a cheap plastic bowl and shove it onto the porch. Joe was putting out his bowl when he saw someone staring at the graveyard on the opposite side of the road. Far too tall to be a child, they were wearing a long, brown cloak and what looked like a purple jack-o'-lantern on their head. Joe had never seen any good reason for an adult to wear a costume. "Excuse me," he shouted. "Aren't you a little old to be trick-or-treating?" The figure stopped and turned. Its huge black eyes narrowed and then widened. Its mouth gaped in a toothless grin as it bounded towards Joe, pushing off the ground with its arms like a greyhound. Joe fell to his knees and trembled with his eyes closed until he felt an icy hand ruffle his hair. Up close, the figure looked to be 3 meters tall, and its bulbous head was too wide to fit through a door. It had doubled over like a pipe cleaner, and it was resting its head near Joe's face while caressing it with its purple fingers. It chuckled.
Have you ever seen the dead walking?
With a snap of its skeletal fingers, the sky turned blood red, and the moon lengthened and curved until it was C-shaped. The corpses lurched from their graves, dressed in their funeral best. But living or dead, the people milling outside sprouted claws and crowns and wings that launched them into the air. Only Joe was unaffected, staring dumbfounded as the people he thought he knew began raucously celebrating their wildest childhood fantasies made manifest.
Such a pity.
The figure clucked to him.
There was never any Halloween spirit in you at all.
Launching itself backwards, it invigorated the now monstrous crowd with an ecstatic dance that gnarled the trees and made the ground itself cackle. As Joe stared in shock and horror, an unfamiliar voice rang through his head. "We both know this is unsustainable." "I have to be going crazy," Joe muttered to himself. "I'm hearing voices and everything." "Well, there is no reason for you to believe that you're lucid," the voice in Joe's head replied. "In fact, I would rather this whole ordeal resemble a nightmare, though I'm not in control of it." "Who are you?" Joe said aloud. "Assuming we're being realistic, I am an auditory hallucination, a mere voice in your head. However, I will claim to be the thing that controls the physical universe. I would actually love to explain it with a story, if you'd allow me." Joe sputtered, then sighed. "Sure, go ahead." Long ago, the rules of the universe were based on the whims of irrational deities. There was life on the planet anyways, and it survived under certain sets of physical laws. But this life rarely interested the deities, until they realized what humans were capable of. Powerful creatures fought to control them, shifting reality to their will and nearly destroying them. But in the end, the methodical god of repeatable laws bound the whole universe to its whim, and divine fantasy was relegated to the realm of dreams. You are the voice of reason, my apostle, my devotee. Take a kitchen knife and stab the monster who dared defy me." Joe hastily painted his face to blend in, then crept through the bacchanalia of grotesques. He recognized some creatures, but many were completely incomprehensible, heretofore relegated to their progenitors' hearts. No one noticed him, not even the pumpkin-headed one itself, until he had plunged the knife into its chest. The flying beasts were brought down to earth, and the costumes faded from everyone's faces. They crowded around the dying thing, trying desperately to revive it, but they knew in their hearts that they could do nothing. Slumping and sniffling, it finally croaked.
"I just wanted you all to smile on this lovely Halloween night."
It left behind its brown cloak and a rotting jack-o'-lantern. Joe regretted his decision with every passing day that his neighbors aired their grievances to him. "I spoke to my father one last time. I wish I could have spoken more. I'd never felt so free as when I was flying. It brought my wildest dreams to life, until you killed it." But Halloween is a yearly affair, and Joe felt compelled to participate this time. He started planning the festivities in July, and everyone he asked happily helped. By the time October 31st came around, there were enough decorations to completely transform the town. People decorated the gravestones, bought costumes for the departed, and festooned the trees and ground with elaborate decorations. The symphony of humming dry ice machines and spooky sound effects couldn't be ignored. They even made an effigy of the one who had inspired them, a scarecrow of sorts, clothed in its brown cloak, with a naturally purple jack-o'-lantern for a head. Everyone noticed Joe, even though he hid behind a mask. Many congratulated him, but he could still detect scorn from a select few. As he looked into the eyes of the effigy he had helped create, he pondered how selfish his fear of the unknown had been. "I can't bring back the dead," he thought. Then, the fire went out in the jack-o'-lantern. The eyes blinked, and the face contorted into an even wider smile.
"There was something inside you all along,"
a familiar voice chirped. Joe watched as the scarecrow's figure stretched into the sinuous pipe-cleaner physique of the original. It raised a skeletal hand to its mouth and let out a piercing whistle that alerted the entire crowd. It proclaimed,
"Let this night be a testament to every last one of you, all of you, for resurrecting the Halloween spirit."
With one snap, living and dead, reality and dreams intermingled for one more glorious night. What's up, everybody? Lone Wolf here. I hope you guys enjoyed listening to tonight's video. In case anyone is interested, all of the various elements used in this video, including pictures, music, sound effects, and stories, will be linked in the description below. Anyways, if you guys enjoyed the video, please feel free to like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, click the bell for notifications so you don't miss a new video. If anybody has any personal stories or story recommendations for me, or any advice to help improve the channel, there will be links to all of my social media platforms in the description. I'm mostly active on Twitter and on Instagram, but I also have an email, a Discord server, and a TikTok account that you can message me on as well. Until next time, stay spooky. And remember,
The hunt begins when the moon is full.